here! I voted for you! Wait a minute. That guy on the grassy knoll's got a gun! He's gonna shoot the president! Holy smokes, I've gotta do something! All right, Lee, time to become an American hero.
darkmyths.org and Neopolis Media Group proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast, featuring your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths come to die. Stay tuned. Be right there.
Surprised about the indictment?
No.
You thought it was coming?
I think the city had common knowledge it was coming.
Why is that?
Well, my family called me and told me that I was being indicted. Different people that I know in courthouse circles told me I'd be indicted, so I was indicted.
Well, why? I mean, why? How did they know this?
Well, I wouldn't know how they knew.
Well, what would give them reason to feel this?
I wouldn't have the slightest idea.
You're saying that even before you went before the grand jury today, you figured you were going to be indicted?
I laid 8-5.
You laid 8-5?
And I will pick the money up.
You bet on yourself that you'd be indicted.
Right.
Why, Mr. Andrews?
Intuition.
Do you think that somebody was... But in your opinion, do you think a conspiracy did exist?
I don't think so. Now, I'm not saying a conspiracy in relation to Mr. Garrison's investigation. That's his problem. It's my analysis of the Warren report, and I don't mean anyone to take out of context my opinion of a conspiracy.
In other words, you're not saying that... You're saying that maybe perhaps Garrison might uncover something the Warren Commission doesn't know.
No, I don't say that. Actually, I shouldn't have answered the question at all, and before I thought accurately, I began to answer, and I had to double back, and as they say back home, crawfish, you know? Pull up. Really, I shouldn't have answered that because that's derogatory to the opinions expressed by our Honorable Assistant District Attorney, the Jolly Green Giant.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 118 of the Lone Gunman Podcast. This is your boy Rob Clark with you today. Okay, we're going to be talking about Clay Shaw today. And the reason we're going to be talking about Clay Shaw today, and the reason Jim Garrison went after Clay Shaw was, or part of the reason I guess I should say, was the comments of Dean Andrews, who you just heard right prior to his indictment for perjury by Jim Garrison. And trust me, we'll get into them. We'll get into that. But first, straight off the bat, I wanted to thank all my listeners for your extreme patience and understanding and your well wishes and your concerns. There was no show last week. I was actually in the middle of recording a show last week when I received a phone call that my grandfather had passed away. It was relatively unexpected. He lived a very long and full life, 91 years, and he was still doing good, still had his mental facilities intact, still driving. He did need a little bit of help with the walker getting around, but he was always in great spirits, and he was my buddy from a very, very young age. And I got to enjoy 42 long years with him, and I'm very much appreciative for that, and he will be missed greatly by me and the rest of our family. So thank you to everybody out there for understanding why there wasn't a show last week, and understanding and being patient with me. We laid him to rest yesterday, and I wanted to get back to business. I'd also been down past 5 days with some horrible, I guess it was strep throat. I don't know. It was brutal. When you swallow and you feel like, shards of glass are stabbing the inside of your throat. Just general tiredness and feeling like crap, fever. So thankfully all that is over with, and my grandfather has been laid to rest. Hope everybody out there had a great Memorial Day weekend. And it's been long enough, and we're going to kick this show off. Instead of interrupting the show, we're going to kick this show off, of course, with some
ridiculousness of the week.
That's right, folks. Some ridiculousness of the week. It's back and better than ever. Of course, most of you people get to see some of this stuff firsthand, and there's actually two things that are kind of intertwined a little bit that I want to talk to you about today. And the first thing is comes to us from the Ralph St. Kay and of course the Oswald Innocence Campaign. It's either him or Judy. The most ludicrous crap in the world comes from these two. But I've got two real good gems for you. So, and I've actually seen Judy post about this as well, Ralph, and there's another fellow by the name of Tom Maros who put something up on YouTube regarding this as well. And what I'm talking about is the Jim Lavelle white "don't shoot me" suit. Okay? There's been a big to-do about, I guess basically Judy and Ralph saying that Lavelle knew Oswald was going to be shot and that he was going to be holding on to Oswald, and he wanted to make sure that he stood out as, a police officer and did not want to be shot. So in late November, he's wearing a summer suit. I don't know what that thing is in the South where you don't wear white after Labor Day, but Jim Lavelle did. Now, I'm not sure if this suit was white or like a real light tan. I lean toward light tan, but, whatever it is, it was damn near white. But they seem to think that either this was a "don't shoot me" suit, just to make sure, hey, I'll be next to the guy, but hey, don't shoot me, or it was to mark Oswald's position to make sure that the shooter shot the right person. Not that having his name and his likeness and him plastered on live television and in various newspapers and magazines, and those, over the span of that short weekend there, that nobody would not be able to recognize Lee Harvey Oswald. But, this guy Tom Maros takes it a step further and alleges that, of course, before they proceeded to the basement, they were, the officers, Lavelle, Fritz, and all, they were up in Fritz's office on the third floor, I believe it was, and there was actually a direct line of sight from the Western Union store where Jack Ruby purchased his, or wired money to Western Union to one of his dancers, Little Lynn, I believe it was. And anyway, he's alleging that he could see Fritz's office from right outside of this Western Union. And he's thinking that maybe Jim Lavelle being in the window and being seen with this white suit so that he would stand out would be a signal to Jack Ruby to say, hey, okay, we're going to be going down soon. Of course, it's very hard to prove that. And Jim Lavelle's official response or reason that he was wearing that suit that day was that that's simply what his wife had laid out for him to wear. He did, in fact, have other dark suits. He was photographed, I believe, on Friday or Saturday, and he did have on a dark color or black suit. So we know he did have other suits. But according to him, that was the suit that his wife had laid out for him. And it's something about that the suit was, it came to him secondhand, and it had to be altered in certain places to fit him correctly. I'm not sure the whole background on it, but that's the story. Okay? So that's ridiculous enough. That Jim Lavelle would knowingly wear this horrible white suit in late November in winter. But, of course, the second one is even more ridiculous than the first. Ralph Sinkay is alleging on his blog that the person that shot Jack Ruby in the basement was not, in fact, Jack Ruby at all. That's right. He says that through keen camera placement and with a little help from detectives that were arresting with him and struggling him to the ground, that his identity was concealed and that we never actually saw Jack Ruby's face. Therefore, we cannot conclude that Jack Ruby was, in fact, the shooter. He says that this guy, the shooter, was a little... Because, Ralph's an expert on bodies and clothing and things of this nature, as we can see from his work with the Doorway Man. But he says this figure in the basement is just a little too burly, husky, broad-backed, different haircut than Jack Ruby. And it's just ludicrous for this not to be Jack Ruby, okay? I mean, he was seen by various other policemen and newsmen who knew who he was in the basement before he actually shot Oswald. And after he was arrested, he was questioned by several Dallas police officers who knew who he was, who recognized him, who spoke with him, who questioned him, and who will attest that it was, in fact, Jack Ruby. And of all the instances that Jack Ruby had to speak, both to the Warren Commission, to his lawyers, on camera, in court, in books, never, ever, ever did Jack Ruby ever deny shooting Oswald. Ever. Ever. Why would he need a murder double? It makes no sense whatsoever. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And that, folks, is your
Ridiculousness of the week.
So, oh my God, what is this? Oh. Ralph is going to sing us out of that segment. I think I've heard this tune before. Sounds very old. Pretty catchy tune. Okay. I won't put you through any more of that misery. Thank you, Ralph Sinkay. He never fails to bring us a good tune.
He's as blind as he can be.
Oh, God. Alright, enough of that. I can't take it anymore. Sorry, I couldn't find Ralph's song, Ruby Didn't Do It. But but maybe he's yet to record it. I don't know. I'm sure if he hasn't yet, it will be in the near future. One of Ralph's instant classics. For more great Ralph's and K tunes, make sure you look up his YouTube channel. if you just want a really good laugh. Okay, enough of all this ridiculousness. Let's get into what we're going to talk about here today, and that is Clay Shaw, damn it. Now, how did Clay Shaw come into the purview of Jim Garrison and his investigation? Well, I'll tell you. And that's the reason I played Dean Andrews at the beginning of the show. Because Dean Andrews told Jim Garrison that the afternoon of the assassination, he received a phone call. And the person on the other end of the line was someone who he had done a little bit of business with in the past, a fellow by the name of Clay Bertrand, who asked him to travel to Dallas to be counsel, basically be Lee Oswald's lawyer. Now, in the past, this Bertrand fellow had obtained the services of Andrews for some of his homosexual clients. Bertrand was believed to be a homosexual with a lot of money. And Andrews told Garrison initially that he believed that Bertrand was Clay Shaw. He later retracted that statement, and hence the perjury charges. But he weathered the storm. Now, there's only a couple reasons that highly intelligent lawyers change their story. One is if they realize that maybe they opened their mouth and shouldn't have and don't really want to get sucked into this whole mess. Or, of course, there's the old good old-fashioned just threat. Hey, we're going to kill you and your whole family if you say anything, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And old Dino didn't make it too long after that. I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. He made it till 1981, actually. So he's not a early death. But basically, about 2 weeks after the assassination, the FBI reported that Andrews had submitted that Bertrand was a figment of his imagination. The FBI report stated that Andrews had been hospitalized at the time with pneumonia and was under heavy sedation, which is, of course, why he told the Warren Commission that he did not accept the offer to go be Lee Oswald's lawyer. He was actually in the hospital sick at the time and couldn't make it. However, Andrews later would deny the FBI report, claiming that he had never suggested that Bertrand might not be real. Later, Andrews would claim that Bertrand was a cover for his friend Eugene Davis. In later years, Andrews continued to maintain that he had, in fact, received a phone call asking him to defend Oswald, but claimed that he was afraid to reveal the caller's true identity. And that was basically the story he took to his grave. So, a lot of flip-flopping, but in the end, of course, the truth comes out. He was afraid to reveal the person's true identity. Now, why would you be afraid to reveal the person's true identity? Well, maybe if you think that they might be wrapped up in some kind of elaborate conspiracy to kill the President of the United States, that you probably wouldn't stand a good chance of revealing information about that. It's enough to scare anybody. But, it's... Now, Andrews also states that in the summer of '63, Lee Oswald had actually visited his office, and he was seeking legal advice about his wife's about his citizenship status, his wife's status, and his undesirable discharge from the Marine Corps. And Andrews remembered him because he thought he was a little swishy. Swishy. He said he walked a little swishy. Thought he might have been a little. I thought he might have been a swinging cat, if you dig what I'm saying. So, old Dino, man. I mean, I love the way the guy talked. I mean, you can't beat it. You just can't beat it. Even in that short little piece I played at the beginning, there's some gems. You know? So I was indicted. But, you know, the truth, of course, eluded Jim Garrison. And come to find out later, Clay Shaw actually did have ties to the CIA. You know, all these papers came out, you know, later on that... Now, Clay Shaw died in, I believe, 72, 74. I might have to check that. But, you know, it wasn't too long after the Garrison trial that Clay Shaw was passed. And, you know, the official documents say that he was a CIA contact agent, and was so for a period of approximately 10 years or so, up until 1956. But, you know, if you're in a position such as Clay Shaw was in, which is part of head of an international trademark, which allows you to travel to many different countries, sit on many different boards of directors for various important companies and things of this nature, then, you know, the CIA might put down that your relationship ended in 56 when in fact it really didn't end then. But this is not, I'm not saying that Clay Shaw was a honest-to-God CIA agent that planned the assassination of the president. That's not what I'm saying at all, okay? I'm just saying that it has been proven, and it has came out, that he did have CIA ties, okay? Now, interesting to note, and it's been mentioned in previous episodes, that the first phone call that Clay Shaw made after he was arrested was to Fred Lee Chrisman. Now, that's a very odd person for Clay Shaw to be calling first, right after he's arrested, because one would think initially that there could be no tie there whatsoever to Clay Shaw. I mean, Fred Chrisman lived in Washington State. Clay Shaw lived in New Orleans. But when you start digging and digging and digging, it becomes very clear that Fred Chrisman made many, many trips to New Orleans in the early 60s. Probably at least 20 in 1963 alone. And I forget the exact number that was given, but, you know, numerous trips. Turns out also Fred Lee Chrisman was a homosexual as well. So they could have met or known each other from these various circles. And they were also in the service together at about the same time, and could have definitely met. Both former, you know, military intelligence guys. Likely knew each other. So there's a lot here. Now, Garrison went after Fred Chrisman. He believed Fred Chrisman was a government agent, CIA agent, but he couldn't prove it. In fact, we have documents now that the CIA has released, and Joan Mellon had obtained them, referring specifically to Fred Lee Chrisman as an agent of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thomas Beckham has said in print in his own book and to the HSCA that Fred Lee Chrisman was his CIA handler. and that, of course, Beckham worked for the CIA as well, but that Fred Lee Chrisman was his handler. Okay? He said Chrisman was, just a very intelligent guy. He was still linked. Excuse me. Still linked to several branches of intelligence and military industrial complex type contacts, extreme right wing contacts. Later on, of course, after the Garrison thing, and Fred Chrisman in the late 60s, early 70s hosted a radio show under the pseudonym of John Gold, and he also wrote a book under the same pseudonym called The Murder of a City, Tacoma, Washington, where he wrote very extensively about the politics going on in this town and how it was being, the town was just being murdered, by these horrible politicians, and they needed to go back and it was becoming a very left-leaning town and very liberal, and of course Chrisman is more right-wing, old school type dude, anti-integration, didn't want to move anything forward, like keep things the way they were. So he was very outspoken about that, and I even obtained the book, Murder of a City, Tacoma, and he briefly mentions about the Kennedy assassination and the Garrison investigation, and of course he didn't admit anything. But I would encourage everyone to go back and read Thomas Beckham, his HSCA testimony. And I'll put a link to it with the post for this show. It's, maybe about 20 pages long. His book is out there. If you can find it, good luck. It was self-published. Not too many copies exist. I've never seen one on Amazon. I managed to obtain one myself last year. Did a show about it. So if you want to go back and check that out, that'd be cool with me. If you want to learn more about that, what he said in the book, it mirrors pretty much what he's told the HSCA. He said that Chrisman was so important, he had a car phone in his car in the early 60s. Okay, and this is way before cell phones, people. Okay? So keep thinking this kind of technology doesn't exist. And of course, Chrisman was involved in the whole Maury Island incident, UFO sightings, things of this nature. But look, back to Clay Shaw. Was Clay Shaw involved in the Kennedy assassination? Garrison found a few people who could put him in the company of David Ferry and Lee Oswald. Perry Russo. A lot of people say that Perry Russo wasn't credible. Well, you know what? Perry Russo maintained his story. And he told it in court. And he told it with Clay Shaw sitting right there. And he pointed him out in court. Said, that's the guy I saw. Using the name Clay Bertrand when they met. And at David Ferry's apartment, they were discussing the Kennedy assassination. Now, this doesn't mean that Clay Shaw was some kind of, planner, organizer of the event. He was just in the right circle of people and probably a high-ranking power in the city, with ties to these right-wing extremist groups, intelligence, things of this nature. That maybe he was privy to some information. But Perry Russo maintained his story up until up until the 90s. You know, his life was never the same after testifying at the Garrison trial. You know, he could never hold a job, couldn't have a decent life, but he never changed his story. For at least 25 more years, he never changed his story, not once. When he had every opportunity to go back and say, look, Garrison made me say this, Garrison made me say that, this didn't really happen, I didn't really see him there, but, I wanted this, I was promised that. None of that. He maintained till the day he died that he saw Clay Shaw, David Ferry, and Lee Oswald together in David Ferry's apartment. Okay? There was also, I think Garrison found another witness who had seen David Ferry with Clay Shaw, not at his apartment, but in a different venue. We have the incident in Jackson, Louisiana, Jackson, Clinton, where Lee Oswald was there disrupting the Congress on Racial Equality voter registration drive for black voters. Seen by multiple witnesses throughout the town, and pointed out to in court. Of course, some of these witnesses were discredited, but it's things like this that were why Jim Garrison was going after Clay Shaw. Look, David Ferry would have been the prime one. Now, Jack Martin, right after the Kennedy assassination, of course, waltzed into Jim Garrison's office and said, look, you need to talk to this guy. He was in he was in Dallas, on November 22nd, 1963. It had something to do with the Kennedy assassination. You need to talk to this guy. So Garrison did. And of course, David Ferry said, oh, no, me and some friends were just ice skating for the weekend, duck hunting, whatever we were doing. Nothing to see here. And, Garrison turned him over to the FBI anyway. Of course, he did the same song and dance for the FBI, and they determined that there was nothing there and was not pursued any further. Was not interviewed by the Warren Commission. David Ferry was not. Dean Andrews was, however. Okay. Now, of course, David Ferry passed in, I believe, 1967, and he had started talking by then to some of Garrison's investigators. He was actually being held, I don't know if it was at the Fontainebleau Hotel, under protective custody by Lou Ivon, right before his death, because he was worried that, somebody's going to come get him. Well, he stayed there for a couple of nights. He started talking, kind of told Ivon, what was going on, and that, he said, he just couldn't stay there anymore. He had to go home, get some affairs in order, and this, that, and the other. And a couple days later, he's dead. Okay, he's dead. And whether or not he was a witness with information or a participant in some form or fashion, whether it be to fly out the shooters or what he was doing in Texas on November 22nd, I'm not exactly sure, but it all seems a little sketchy. And of course, David Ferry is associated with, of course, Guy Bannister, Carlos Marcello, G. Ray Gill, and the whole New Orleans crew. Now it didn't take long. Now, obviously, going back over some of this stuff, you look at the Garrison trial or the investigation, because while the movie JFK is very good in some areas, kind of lacks little truth and substance in others. Because in fact, Jim Garrison never stood up in court and gave these nice, long, eloquent speeches and question witnesses. Much of that stuff was done by his assistant DAs. Almost all of it. Garrison wasn't even present for half the interviews or the grand jury testimony. Okay, he just wasn't. He left a lot of that to his associates, and that's not to say that his investigation wasn't compromised at every turn either, and infiltrated. Okay, because look, whether he knew it or not, New Orleans was a hotbed for Cuban exiles, mafia, gun running, women, seedy, sexual deviants, anti-Castro, extreme right-wingers. Okay, I mean, this was a veritable intelligence hotspot. Okay, and the CIA and the FBI were monitoring events in New Orleans very, very closely. And as we've come to find out, several CIA associated individuals, such as Sergio Arcacha Smith, and various others, were in New Orleans that summer. And were, trying to run these organizations, these anti-Castro, Cuban exile organizations, and this, that, and the other, and Free Cuba Committee, and blah, 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 Democratic Friends of Cuba, and, the Student Directorate, you name it. There's just all kinds of stuff going on. Then you got Bannister doing what he's doing, trying to out the Reds, trying to figure out who can be trusted and who cannot in the city, and to out any possible communist activity and disrupt any civil rights activity when it comes to integration. Because Bannister was involved in all that. When I talked to Keith Gilbert, and you hear him say that what Bannister was doing there sounds just like a page out of the Minuteman handbook. That this is definitely a program that they would have done. He said it sounds just like, and look, Bannister was a Minuteman, member of the John Birch Society, Minutemen, the Louisiana Un-American Activities Committee. He published several hate letters, or zines, or whatever you want to call them, publications, and had a lot of right-wing contacts throughout the South there and into Texas, in Louisiana, on around to Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and the like. And when you read a book like Dr. Caulfield's book, you see the connections, you see the people and how they are connected to folks like General Walker, Willoughby, Bishop, Colonel Bishop, and you can kind of see the progression from the top down. And next week on the show, hopefully, I'm going to have another Minuteman for you. And we are going to be discussing all that in way, way, way more detail. So hopefully that comes and happens, and I'll have it for you right here. It's going to be something that you're not going to want to miss. So make sure you stay in tune for next week's show. But back to Clay Shaw for a second. He was fairly confident that the charges weren't going to stick to him. And, in a lot of the footage, you can see him smoking and joking, literally smoking and joking in the courtroom with his lawyers, and smoking cigarettes, and talking to the newsmen and joking with them and just being in all around good spirits. Being fairly confident that this was not going to stick. Like he knew it wasn't going to stick. You know what I mean? Like he pretty much knew. Despite all the eyewitness, testimony to the contradictory. Wait a minute, I'm saying that wrong. Contrary. That's the word I'm looking for. Despite all the eyewitness testimony to the contrary, who placed Shaw in the company of Ferry and Oswald, or Leon Oswald, or whoever this guy was. Might have not even been Lee Oswald. For all we know, it could have been somebody impersonating Lee Oswald as Leon Oswald. Because Perry Russo could not identify Lee Oswald as the person until a scraggly beard was drawn on the picture, and he says, "Oh yeah, bingo. That's the guy I saw." So who the hell knows who Perry Russo saw? Because Lee Oswald was never known to have a scraggly beard. Or used the name Leon. So who the hell knows? But what he was fairly sure of, it's hard. Clay Shaw was a very distinct looking individual, as was David Ferry. David Ferry had alopecia, no hair on his body, wore, horrible, shitty, messed up looking wigs on his head, and drew big grease pencil eyebrows on his face. These two guys were like Laurel and Hardy. They stuck out in a crowd. Shaw was very, very tall. And Ferry looked like a damn clown with no makeup. So these two guys had very distinct looks. You're not going to mistake these guys for other people. You're just not. And back then, like Joe Miller likes to say, Jim Garrison did not want to make his homosexuality a focus or even mention, when we're talking about all this stuff, because then you're getting into the seedy side of things. And because back then this stuff was more taboo than it is today. Today we're generally okay with people being gay. Of course, there's some people out there that still don't like it, and to the extreme. But for the most part, a general awareness has been made that, hey, this is, if you're gay, you're kind of born this way, and this is just the way things are sometimes in nature, and just have to accept it and let people be who they are, and it is what it is. But a lot of this stuff with a lot of these guys, stems from a feeling of power over another person, another man. I don't know. It's like they get off on it, that they can have this power over another man to make them do what they want to do, and engage in sexual activities with another man like that. For a lot of people, it's a power trip. That's the turn on. It's not necessarily the, oh my God, he's so cute, like totally, my God. It's more like, yeah, that's right. You're gonna get on. You're gonna suck. Yeah. It's just, a wealthy person power trip. Where they have it all. They have whatever they want, and it just is what it is. It's been going on for eons. Back to Greece. But whatever. Garrison didn't want to use that in the investigation. Didn't want to mention, although many of his witnesses were discredited. As being homosexuals, drug abusers, things of this nature. And when that's the element that you're pulling your witnesses from, and to try to put away another member of this seedier side of life, maybe he should have went there. But that's my opinion. But anyway, Clay Shaw was, in a couple hours, deemed not guilty of having anything to do with the assassination of President Kennedy. Maybe things would have been different if David Ferry had lived to speak at the trial, if Dean Andrews had not retracted his original statement. If the alias that Clay Shaw gave at the police station was allowed into evidence, maybe things would have been different. But what does it really mean? I don't think Clay Shaw was involved in an operational level as far as the Kennedy assassination. But I would think that he would have to know what was going on there, at least in New Orleans, there in the summer of '63. I mean, this stuff's happening right out in front of his trademark. You got Lee Oswald handing out pro-Castro flyers in front of his trademark on the news. And in some of the footage, you can see Clay Shaw walking in the background and into the building. Most people don't know. Hey, David Ferry's Civil Air Patrol headquarters, trademark building. That's right, trademark building. And, there has been other things too. I'm going to pull up something here and read to you. And this is from, I believe, one of Clay Shaw's secretaries who, let me see here, was interviewed by the FBI. This is from March 5th, 1967. Reno Tell to Bureau, February 25th, 1967, 2:02 p.m. Advised this date that Ora Lee, Clay Shaw's former secretary at the International Trade Mart, New Orleans, who is employed by the Heart Fund at the Ochsner Clinic, stated in front of Dr. Charles Moore and others at the Ochsner Hospital, 31 last, after Clay Shaw's press conference where he advised that he had never met David Ferry, that she had seen Ferry go into Shaw's office in the International Trademark Building on a number of occasions, and believed Ferry had privileged entry into Shaw's office anytime he wanted it. Informant furnished the following information in the strictest confidence, since it was furnished to him by a cameraman for Channel Redacted. It just says New Orleans, who swore informant to secrecy before furnishing the information. Informant advised that, according to Redacted, he had talked to the judge who had handled the matter involving Clay Shaw, and this judge stated that after he had seen the evidence District Attorney Garrison has, he strongly believes that if the case against Clay Shaw goes to a jury, the jury will vote 11-1 in favor of conviction. According to Redacted, Garrison's ace in the hole is well-documented proof consisting of a certified photostatic copy of a job application made by Lee Harvey Oswald in his own handwriting during the spring or summer of '63 with a trucking company, name not mentioned, believed to be in New Orleans, in which Oswald listed 3 personal references, one of whom was Jack Ruby. Also mentioned that attorney Sam Zeldin has knowledge of this application, as he is an attorney for this trucking firm. Bureau will be advised of any pertinent developments. So, there's that. Now. We hear from Clay Shaw's personal secretary, Ora Lee. Kept her mouth shut for years because she was scared to death to say anything. Reported to the FBI that she had seen David Ferry in Clay Shaw's office in the Trade Mart on a number of occasions. And she believed that Ferry had privileged access to Clay Shaw, which means he could show up whenever he wanted, didn't have to have an appointment, da-da-da-da-da. Now, like I said before, David Ferry is a very unique-looking individual. And the fact that she knew who this man was, saw him on a number of occasions, tells you that she's fairly sure that the person she saw was David Ferry meeting with Clay Shaw. About what? Of course, we don't know. But, this other thing they're talking about, this Jack Ruby personal reference on a Lee Oswald handwritten application for a job. Garrison said that he had this in his possession. Now, that, folks, is what we call, if it's real, a smoking gun. Because Jack Ruby used to frequently go to New Orleans to, hire... Because I'm guessing it was somewhat of a trade to keep fresh girls in the clubs. He would go to New Orleans and meet with these other club owners and kind of shuffle the girls around a little bit. I think that's where he got Jada from, was New Orleans. So it's very possible, very, very possible these two knew each other beforehand. If Jack Ruby's involved with the mafia, through Carlos Marcello, or just, right-wing connections, this, that, and the other, could have come in contact with Jack Ruby, met him. Hard to tell. But interesting nonetheless. So was Clay Shaw a person of interest? Yes. Do I believe that he told the entire truth of what he knew about the Kennedy assassination? Hell no. I'm not saying that he was a primary principle behind the assassination, but I believe he did have knowledge of some things. The movers and the shakers and the players, if you will. But I still think the jury ended up getting it right. You need, beyond a reasonable doubt, evidence, proof that the man is guilty, and Garrison just didn't have it. At the time. If he had what we know now, maybe he would have come out with something. Maybe that would change Clay Shaw's tune a little bit, get Clay Shaw to open up, start talking himself. Who knows? We'll never know. But anyway, that's it for this week. I just wanted to get a show out there and thank everybody for tuning in and checking it out and understanding why I didn't have a show last week. I greatly apologize for that, but it's life, man. It's one of them things that happens sometimes, and just I appreciate everybody's warm wishes and keeping me in your thoughts and prayers and all that good stuff. And it's much appreciated, much needed, and thank you so much. Now, as you all know, I'm part of a podcast collective called Dark Myths, where you can find that at darkmyths.org, where you can find a ton of other podcasts cut from the same mold, the same vein, the same cloth as this show here. I'm talking true crime. I'm talking full-on first-person narratives to fantasy stories, fiction. You can find a podcast about Russia, Russian life, Soviet life. You can find podcasts about myths and legends, the strange, the unusual, just all kinds of crazy stuff and good stuff. Only quality stuff you're going to find at darkmyths.org. Just like the Lone Gunman podcast, you're going to find other shows you're going to dig if you check it out. So on the post for this show, if you see the Dark Myths banner, click on it. It will take you right there. And we're featuring a show every month from our podcast collective that we're all going to promote the hell out of. Okay? And for the month of May, it was Pete's Paranormal Chronicles by my friend Corey Mambo Correct. And it's a great show. It's funny. It's hilarious. It's a short 15-20 minutes every week. It's a horror mockumentary comedy, and it's kind of in the vein of found audio, in quotes, much like Blair Witch Project was found video. So what we're basically listening in on, if you tune into Pete's Paranormal Chronicles, is a paranormal investigator by the name of Pete Schwartz from the late 90s, is chronicling his adventures with the strange, the unusual, and the paranormal. And it's hilarious. It's a great show. Corey does a great job with it. So I encourage everybody to check it out. I'm going to play you a short trailer, and that'll be the show. And I'm also going to have a banner for Corey's show, Pete's Paranormal Chronicles, up for the post for this show as well. All you can do is click on it. It'll take you right to Corey's website, where you can check out all the episodes, or find it on iTunes. It's on there. It's on Stitcher that I know of. So, it's on Google Play as well. So, any of those, you can subscribe to it, or you can go right to his website and have a listen. But I encourage you to subscribe as well. Here's a little trailer for Pete's Paranormal Podcast, and we'll be back to wrap the show up. Enjoy.
From the imagination comes a story of a paranormal investigator and a nationwide conspiracy that will make your head spin. It's Pete's Paranormal Chronicles, a horror mockumentary series, now presented in supersonic sound. You want action? PPC will deliver action. Drama.
I'm sorry, buddy boy, but that's life, Sometimes people die, you hear me?
Anthropomorphic alligator jazz musicians.
Come on, man, it just isn't fair. You shouldn't be smoking crystal meth down here. I know Christina feels so nice, you gotta taste her. And trust me, I smoke my fair share.
Suspense.
According to Bill, Jonathan had plans to meet with Sarah at her place later that night to watch a movie, and he was secretly expecting some hot stuff to go down. Sadly, he never made it to Sarah's place, and nothing hot went down at all.
And horror. The Dark Myths Podcast Collective presents Pete's Paranormal Chronicles, a comedy horror show. Turn the volume up, turn the lights down.
All right, folks, that's it for this episode. This sumbitch is in the can, beamed up to the satellite, down directly to your ears, people. This is your boy. And don't forget to head to www.tlgpodcast.com for more. And like the damn show on iTunes, people. Please hook a brother up with some good reviews. It helps my show get noticed. So please, leave me a good review on iTunes, Google Play. Damn it. And if you subscribe on Google Play, you get a notification on your mobile device that a new episode has dropped. That's right. It's a good thing to have in your life. I'm telling you, people, get up on it. Make sure you're tuning in next week. Hopefully, another real live Minuteman will be on the show. That's right. If all goes well. Benjamin Banger, baby. freemusicarchive.org. Enjoy the rhythm.